all need to make smart decisions with our money. The Long-Term Investor podcast shows you how by distilling complex financial matters into easily digestible lessons. And now, here's your host, Chief Investment Officer at PlanCorp and the author of Making Money Simple, Peter Lazaroff.
Welcome back to The Long-Term Investor. In this episode, I sat down with Eric and Kali Roberge of Beyond Your Hammock to talk about one of the hardest parts of family finance, and that's how to help your kids financially without losing sight of your own goals. And we covered so much ground. We talked about retirement versus college savings. We talked 529 plans, custodial accounts, Trump accounts. We talked allowance systems and how grandparents can help without making a family money conversation be more complicated than it needs to be. And what I liked about this conversation is we never really treated everything like a pure math problem that just has one right answer, because we know that raising kids around money is messier than that. So we try to strike the balance in our conversation between your own future, your child's future, and the family dynamics that are not always easy to navigate. As always, you can find detailed show notes at thelongterminvestor.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for my newsletter, which has exclusive downloads for things on topics just like these. Last newsletter had a savings chart of all the common savings accounts for children and which ones were right for you. It also had a download that walks you through the steps of whether or not you should make a 529 to Roth transfer, because the answer isn't always yes. Again, you can find that at the show notes at thelongterminvestor.com, or you can sign up for the newsletter using the link at the top of the episode description. And now, here is my conversation with Eric and Kali Roberge. Welcome back to The Long-Term Investor. Today, I'm joined by Eric and Kali Roberge, the faces of Beyond Your Hammock financial planning firm, also the co-hosts of Money for Life podcast. Eric, Kali, thanks so much for joining me here today.
Oh, it's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, I have to share a fun fact. Kali used to be my editor before you had your own child. We're going to talk about kids and money. And I remember writing a post, I think in 2018, about giving my 4-year-old allowance that you helped edit. You also were an editor on Making Money Simple. So I have a number of fans who will think that's super cool. Someone behind the scenes helping with the work. But since you've had your own child, you've had your own hands full. Let's dive right in. Either of you can take it from here. I know that you work with a lot of people, like very successful people in their 40s with kids. And when you're talking to parents about trying to build their own financial foundation, should they think about the trade-off of teaching their kids about money and saving for their kids' future goals?
But two questions there, right? How do you teach your kids about money? And then how do you take care of your own money? And I think teaching kids about money, to me, is a lot harder than taking care of your own financial future, because it's more of a linear, concrete set of steps as far as what should you, quote unquote, do right to establish your own financial future. I think there's some, Eric, you can get more into that, of how do you prioritize yourself over your kids' future. But then teaching kids about money is so tricky, because what you teach a lot of the times can get in the way of what they're learning. So kids are really good at observing what you do, your habits, how you talk about money. And I think that can get really tricky, because we have this, platonic ideal of what we want to do with money. And then there's what we actually do. So I think that can be a challenge. And it's just something that you got to bring a lot of self-awareness to, and a lot of grace to as well, and know that you're not going to get it right 100% of the time, probably not even 50% of the time, right? But you've just got to try and iterate and keep going.
And as far as how do I divide up my own money for me and my money for my child when I don't actually know how much money it's going to cost for college or anything else for the kids? Like, that is the $1 million question. Really tough to answer, but I just always default to, well, do you want to try to optimize for taxes and potentially pay a lot of penalties? Or do you want to optimize for flexibility so that we can adjust as the time comes? And most people, including myself, default to the flexibility part, which makes the plan a lot more clear. And we can get into the details later on, but that's the essence of how we talk about that.
It's very understandable for a parent to want to take care of their kid's future. I find myself constantly reminding parents, hey, like, they can take a loan for college. You can't necessarily take a loan for retirement. And I'm pretty sure if we were to give our kids the choice of us living in their basement during our retirement versus like them having student loan debt, they would probably take the student loan debt. Maybe not when they're cute and young like our kids are. And they might say, I want to live with you forever. But realistically, by the time they're teenagers, I think they recognize, no, it'd be nice to have my own life. But Eric, you mentioned a point like when you're saving for college, you don't always know what a child's path is going to be. And you mentioned a preference for emphasizing flexibility. I mean, maybe talk about your general framework for how you get started on parents who want to save for their kids' college.
Well, the first thing I say is save money, right? That is important. If you're saving the money and the money is available, you can then decide how to use it. If you're not saving money and it's not available, there's not many options there. So if you can find the money to save, let's put it to work. Let's make sure it's invested. But when it comes down to it, because we don't know what college is going to cost, we don't know if the kid is going to go to an Ivy League school or some like University of Southern California that's like $100,000 right now, or they're going to go to a community college or a trade school or not even go to school. Big extremes there. Trying to think that you can know how much to save for the child is just a losing game, right? And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal recently with David Blanchett, who I'm sure you know, in the financial planning industry. He's in the same vein. He's saying like, I want flexibility over tax optimization because I don't know how I'm going to use the money. Maybe it's for college, maybe it's for a down payment, maybe it's for a wedding. I want the money there for my kids, and that's what I know right now. So let's focus on that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I feel like when someone has a savings goal for college, like they're like, I know my kid's going to go to a traditional 4-year school, even if they don't know where, but they just, in their heart of hearts, no matter the age of the child, they're like, that's what's going to happen because that's the life I'm picturing for myself and my child. And I'll often say like, hey, target like 60 to 70% of the costs. Now that's an avenue that gives you some flexibility. Saving outside of 529 can give you some flexibility, but I still think that the 529 is really that default savings account. Maybe they're not helpful in all instances, but there's a lot of good benefits. I mean, is there a place that the two of you find that they're most helpful, or maybe even share sometimes when you think they're oversold?
I think if it's your only vehicle, maybe for college savings or just future savings in general, I think that's probably where we want to stay away from. I don't think we've ever told someone like, don't use a 529 plan. It's more about, leverage the tools that are available to you. A 529 plan is one of them. And then you have some other options as well. So I think it's more about creating a balanced mix rather than saying it's, this is definitely, you need this 529 plan for this situation or you don't need it. Just like we want to try to balance like living well now with planning responsibly for the future. You want to balance the tools that you're using to do that.
I thought one perspective was interesting. I was talking to a guy named Jack Wang. He's actually a college planning expert. He was on our podcast. And what he was saying was, it's not necessarily about like what you're doing with your money now to put in a 529 plan. It's more about like, all right, in the year that you're paying for college, where's the money going to come from? And what is your tax rate going to be? Your own personal federal tax rate. And can you access the money from different places? Like if you put money into a Roth IRA and you take your own money out, that is the contribution, that is tax-free money at the time of college, that works as long as your retirement isn't getting deflated because of it. So there are different types of accounts that you can use, but overarching is looking at your tax bracket in the years of funding college to make sure that you're benefiting from tax strategy.
Yeah, and I feel like for a while, I mean, the flexibility that you're given with a 529 nowadays, after like the Secure Act 2.0, there's been a lot of off ramps for people who perhaps oversave to a 529. So, I think when you don't know where to start, and if you're not working with an advisor, oftentimes I'll tell people, and I'd be curious if you agree or disagree, like if you get a state tax deduction for making that contribution and you have plenty of cash flow and you're saving plenty for retirement, like you might as well go ahead and make that contribution. Chances are it's not going to, if you make that on an annual basis, just up to whatever your state allows to deduct. It's not like that's going to cover all the costs of college expenses. I get more concerned when people will like accelerate multiple years of gifts into a 529 all at once, which I do recognize can every once in a while have some estate planning benefits, but more often than not, like is just an unnecessary lump sum to go into a 529. I mean, what are your reactions to kind of some of my views on this point?
So I do like the 529 plans because you have that access to rolling over up to $35,000 for the beneficiary into their Roth IRAs. when they have earned income later on. That's a nice benefit. But I also, for us specifically, we contribute $1,000 a quarter into a 529 plan. Massachusetts gives us up to $2,000 of deduction for state, and it's a 5% state. So it's not really, like $100 that we get as a tax deduction. So not all that influential. And so I'd rather, again, default to the flexibility. But other states, like I think yours might be what you said, 10 to 15.
I think I'm 16,000 in Missouri. Yeah. But like Illinois, I think is 6 or 8. Texas, there are no state taxes, or Florida, so you don't get any benefit. But so it sounds like you're on the same page. Like, hey, if you get a deduction and you have the extra savings capacity, like, why not?
Exactly. Yeah. Especially like New York, another $10,000, and you could be really high taxes in that state. So that's going to be a huge advantage to you. So do it. Yes.
And you mentioned that. So I go into this a little bit in the prior week's episode. So if you're watching us on Cheddar or on YouTube, you can go to thelongterminvestor.com. I will link to the episode that actually has a flow chart that explains like, hey, can I convert my 529 into a Roth? And Eric, you mentioned you can only convert as of right now up to $35,000 in total for that beneficiary. And that's not all at once. You have to have the same normal Roth rules applying. So if your kid graduates and gets a super high paying job and doesn't qualify for a Roth, you can't convert the 529. That said, I have this feeling that they're just going to make it more and more flexible over time. Like the government wants to incentivize saving for college. Seems like a reasonable thing. All that said, each time these benefits to a 529 come out, I do feel like sometimes people underutilize custodial accounts. And you mentioned at the onset, Eric, like flexibility is key in the planning process that you do with your clients. Any kind of thoughts on that or ways that you think through clients in saving to a 529 versus a custodial account?
I'm thinking of a couple of things like UJMA accounts or UTMA accounts versus just like having a joint account that the parents own that is not actually in the name of the kids, but is, kind of the name of the kids in the end. That gives a lot of flexibility. I don't like the UGMA accounts, right? Because for me, having the money get into the account, growing, and then having it be given to the kid at age 18, and they can use it for anything they want to use it for, and you have no control over it after that, just seems like a recipe for disaster. Or at least at best, a coin flip as to the money goes to good use or it doesn't. So I'd rather keep the control if I'm giving it for my children, and then we can educate them and help them work on how to use it. And then at least we can guide that process versus, pulling the cord and saying, I hope you do what's best for you right now.
Small pivot from like the college track. We have these Trump accounts that are going to be eligible for contributions in July of 2026. Any high level thoughts on the Trump accounts and where those may or may not fit? Recognizing that I'm not totally sure that I personally have like a set it and forget it playbook for everybody on the topic at this point.
I mean, if you have a child that's eligible for the $1,000, seed money that the government is going to give, which I think is for kids born in 2025 to 2028 right now, sure, why not open an account and get that money and let it ride? Beyond that, we don't love them for a few specific reasons. One of them is that they are currently administered by the Treasury Department, not by a custodian like Fidelity or Schwab. Not that Fidelity or Schwab just knows everything and is perfect and never makes a mistake, but they are a custodian that's set up to manage investment accounts versus the Treasury is not. So the UX, the access, how that platform is going to be administrated, from kind of like the housekeeping end of things, it's just a question mark. It's more uncertainty. And I don't think that any of us needs more uncertainty in our financial lives. And I think the other big thing is that the investment funds are going to be limited to U.S. companies, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you want to support U.S. companies, that's great. But if you're concerned about investment performance over time, that's a big lack of diversification within that account. So they're not, on the face of it, they're not like bad accounts. But I think there are better alternatives if you have goals to grow the money. And I think too, because we live in such a polarized political environment, and I don't see that resolving anytime soon, I think there's also uncertainty around the future of those accounts. There's nothing to say that a future administration who has very different views could not come in and dismantle that system. Again, not saying that will happen, but that wouldn't surprise me either, just based on how polarized everything is right now and how strongly people feel about one way or the other. Again, it's just more uncertainty that we don't necessarily need when there are great alternatives like 529s, like UTMAs, like taxable investment accounts.
All really good points. And the last one you made, I think I saw a headline that California may not acknowledge like the tax deferral, which is a good example of like, we don't even really know how well this is all going to hold up. But if there's free money there, I love it. Like, who doesn't want to take the free money? If it ends up getting taxed in some weird way later, it's still more money than you had before. So I'm with you on that. Kind of pivoting a little back to like the kids and the like, saving for kids, I think is, going to be specific to each person. You build a financial plan in which not every dollar you earn can be saved, and not every dollar you save can be invested, and not every dollar you invest is going to go to just education or just retirement. But when you think about trying to instill good money habits in your children, you mentioned you have a 4-year-old daughter. So maybe it's hard to have the big money life lessons happening in your personal life. But if you do have some that you're doing, would love to hear about it. But would also love to hear the advice that you give to clients who are typically having kids who are asking more money questions or at that ripe age.
For our daughter, and she is 4, so we can't sit her down and be like, here's a budget, here's a spreadsheet. Although she does sometimes help me. Like I said earlier, kids learn from watching what you do. So whenever I am going in and I track, I'm a person, I have a manual spreadsheet. Any transaction, I manually put it in the spreadsheet. I'm not saying that's the most efficient way to go, but I like doing it because it helps my awareness of our cash flow. So whenever I'm going and kind of logging in my receipts in that spreadsheet, I'll invite her over and be like, hey, do you want to press the numbers on the computer? Like, I'll give you the number, you press it. So I'm involving her in that way. And I used to never carry cash, but I'm trying to carry more cash now so that she can see when I go to pay for something, I can count out the money, I can hand it over, and she can see there's an exchange of something there versus a card. It just gets tapped and it's a little bit more intangible. We do give her an allowance. And I think I go back and forth on this of like, is it right to give a 4-year-old an allowance? I don't know. But I think where I came down on it is she just gets the allowance every week. It's not tied to chores or anything like that. That's things that she does because she's part of the family. There's an expectation of you will be involved and you will help out because you're part of the family. The allowance is more to give her an opportunity to, again, like hold something tangible, something physical, their dollar bills, and to give her a chance to figure out, well, how do I manage this money? And in a very small way, she's got a visual piggy bank. It's got a give, save, spend bucket. And she gets to decide, where do you want to put that money? Do you want to save it? Do you want to put it in your spend? Again, we'll see if this holds true over time, but my theory is because we as her parents are saving money for her, she will probably have access to some degree of money. Like, she doesn't need to learn that, oh, I work to earn money, because to some degree, she probably will just have money based on what we're doing for her. So I thought it was more important to prioritize letting her work with the money, letting her manage it, letting her kind of mess up with it. And I have noticed, like, she has gotten much better about when we go to the store and says, hey, I want this toy. And I can say, well, you can use your money.
That's the best part. That's the best part of allowances by far.
So she's really cut down on like asking for things. She thinks about it more. So she'll still ask, but it's not incessant. And when I say like, well, you can use your money. I'll help you count it out. She's about 50-50. Sometimes she's like, yep, I want that thing. She's very decisive. But other times she will be like, oh, never mind. So I think that's helpful, just to give her an opportunity in a very small way to make mistakes, or to get like gratification for like, hey, I did save up this money for a couple of weeks and now I went and I bought the thing that I like. But yeah, it could just be a personality thing too. Like, she makes it look like the system's working, but it's just how she's wired. We'll see.
Well, since I'll just share, because I have 2 boys and we also did the save, share, spend buckets. And it worked really well with the first one. And I've come to learn with our second one that money personality certainly plays a big role in the ongoing success of those. The discipline that we have as parents to adhere to them plays a role. And we similarly did not tie allowances to chores. We still don't. But because that's what the research says, not to do it because you're part of a family and household. I got to tell you, I really wish that we had tied it to chores, and we might change it at some point. The big transition, though, was when we went from physical dollars with our oldest to a digital account. So we use something called Greenlight, where they have those same buckets. But he doesn't really spend any of his money, so the buckets don't matter anymore. He is a very generous gift giver, though, to his brother, to his parents. When he can do things for charity, he likes to do it. And so for those of you listening, if you've never really considered a structured process to allowance, what Kali is describing, I think is great. I can plug in some resources at thelongterminvestor.com if you all want to learn more about those processes. And I also think maybe you guys can chime in on these conversations you have with parents, but a lot of times parents are hesitant to do anything because they don't feel confident in their own money capabilities. Suppose if you're watching or listening to us this deep into a conversation, chances are like your money chops are pretty good, but the example you set, you're not going to learn more from anybody about money than you are your parents. And so do you ever have clients come to you asking for assistance or asking for guidance on these sort of things?
It's not a ton of questions that come to us from parents about that kind of thing. It's more about like, how do we use our money to best give the best life possible to our child, whether that is through education, and that's like early stage. I mean, everything from like preschool or nanny versus daycare to private middle school, private high school, and college. It's more about that. And then saying like, well, we want to take trips and really experience life with our kids before college. How do we make sure we can fund that kind of thing? Versus the how do I make sure my child is managing the money effectively? So it's an interesting question, and I wonder why people don't ask it more. And I probably should bring it up more, but I don't hear it much.
Well, I'm kind of curious. I mean, you have advice that you've been giving throughout this, both on managing your own personal goals with your goals for your child, as well as advice or at least processes that you're instilling with your daughter. Do you feel like there are any areas in which your advice for anything related to kids and money differs from what you actually do in practice? And I'll happily share too. This is all good fun. We don't always follow our own advice perfectly.
Yeah, no comment.
I don't know about advice, but I think my mindset shift, that's been massive since I had a child. Like, I think before I was very much more living like on paper, like what is the correct answer on paper? That's what I want to do. That's what I want to optimize for. And it was easy to do that because life was just simpler. But throw a kid in and it's like, this is way more nonlinear and complex. Like things are just, I think it shattered my illusion of control. Like that's really the thing like that I had to let go of when I became a parent. And it made me feel a lot more, not YOLO, but I do want to live more in the present because I've just realized how much you really cannot control no matter how much you plan for it, no matter how much energy you put into it. There are things, life is going to throw you curveballs and there's not much you can do about that. I mean, you can plan, but at the end of the day, you've just got to adapt to what is. So I think it's made me feel weirdly more relaxed, like about money, versus I stressed about it a lot more before. And now I'm like, well, I mean, there's only so much I can do. I've done my best. I got to let go of the rest. I think that's been the biggest shift. I don't know if there's anything advice-wise that's radically changed where I would tell someone one thing, but I would do a different thing. It's probably spending more, I guess. We spend a lot more.
I think it's the work, money, personal life conundrum, right? Like I know that in my business, the harder I work, the more money I can make. The more money I make, the more freedom I have to use the money. But there's a balance that shifts over time. And it's like, well, how much time do you want to commit to work? And what am I showing my daughter by putting so many hours into work? Like, what is that telling her that work is important, that it's not? And she's like, I don't want to work. Look what it's doing to daddy. Or is it actually helpful? And I don't know what's coming across right now at age 4. And I would like to get into that more and just talk through it with her. Because I struggle with it. I don't know what the right balance is. Like how much money is enough, right? Versus like, I love my business. I love working on it. It's like a hobby for me. So there's that too. But also if I'm doing that, I'm not with the family.
I can really relate to both of what you commented there. People often ask before they have children or when they're pregnant saying like, well, how do I save for a child, or how much does it cost to like raise a child? I'm like, it costs whatever you make. Like whatever you make is going to like drive a lot of the experience and the spending. And I, like you, Kaylee, have sort of relinquished as much control on spending. I'm still the cheap one in the family and still the one who will be the first to slam the brakes on certain things. But there's just a lot of pressures that parents face to give their kids these great experiences. Social media does not make that any better, as we all know. And I think that in general, the dynamic generationally that we face as parents compared to our parents is quite different. Maybe it is the aspect of social media. Maybe it is the electronification of money that sort of changes the way that all works, and the credit cards and the points. Like you don't find many retirees today who have like 8 credit cards open. But if you bump into like a Gen X or Gen Y or Gen Z, they may have 6, 7, 8 credit cards, and they're spending on travel. And it's just like, I think it often blows away our clients who are in the baby boomer generation, how much money gets spent by millennials or Gen X on travel. It's a very different experience because every generation had to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow. But on the on the topic of grandparents, we haven't really covered the grandparents yet. Many are very excited to support their grandchildren in some way. Sometimes their gifts are very helpful. Sometimes they can complicate things. Any sort of broad guidance or experiences that you all have witnessed with clients or personally that you think would be useful for the grandparents to hear who are watching and listening to us?
Well, I do think it's an important topic. And generally there's I will pass it along after I die, or I will give it to them now while I'm living so I can see them utilizing it, which you could argue both points, right? I like the let me experience it with them kind of angle. And that's what I'm trying to convince my parents to do that more, right? I know Kaylee always talks about it too, but they're not super wealthy, but they have enough money to live their own life and then maybe do a little bit more. So going on vacations and spending the money, please, Dad, pay for me to go on vacation. No, but like helping the grandkids and going on vacations and splurging a little bit more than they otherwise would, instead of saying, well, let's throw it into a 529 plan, which they still do, or let's give it to them when we pass. So I think it's the experience your money by giving to those who you love and seeing how it can benefit them as well. That is my go-to for this conversation.
I think as a first step for grandparents or parents would be to talk about it, because I don't think that happens a lot. Like everyone has their own assumptions about what people want, don't want, what's best, what's not. So I think if you can start ideally by just having a conversation, if you're the grandparent with your adult children, about like, what are your goals? What would you like to see? And you don't have to do what they tell you, but it's just opening that conversation to understand, like, maybe there's something that they're struggling with that you don't realize that would be helpful. And on the other end, like for parents, if you're of young children, that's where I think the 529 plan is actually really valuable. Even if you don't use it, open it so that the grandparents can fund it. They have a specific place that they can put the money. This is particularly helpful, I think, if a conversation isn't possible, like it's just for whatever reason, family dynamics aren't going to allow for that open and honest communication. If you have if you want to give something, here it is. Here's the 529 plan. And that way, it's a little bit less emotional. It's for college. Grandparents tend to like that. So I think that's where it's a really useful tool, is to just have it open. They can fund it or not. But yeah, I think really being able to have that conversation about what everyone would ideally like to have and what needs to happen is a good first step that most people don't take.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think the talking about money, and I really view this, and I could be wrong, and maybe people on YouTube will comment that I'm wrong, or listeners will comment that I'm wrong, but generationally, like people who are in the generation who are more likely to be a grandparent as of right this moment, they didn't talk about money. That wasn't something that was okay. And so there are some generational differences. And I agree with you, Eric, like the more that they can invest in experiences with their grandkids, the better. I would like to think that my children will remember trips they take with their grandparents, or, if they go to a birthday lunch and go shopping afterwards with a grandparent, or just like little stuff like that. is probably going to be remembered at their funeral more so than like the amount in their 529 plan. I'm not telling grandparents who are listening or watching not to do that, but I just feel like there are probably ways that you can give directly, and it's not just spoiling and giving them stuff, but like how can you create situations that you can enjoy them watching? It is also a difficult balance, I think, for people to gift to their adult children and then see their adult children. I mentioned travel, like take a lavish vacation. They think, well, did that gift mean that they basically like the money's fungible? Is that what it paid for? And yeah, it's a tough dynamic. Kaylee, as you point out, the more that you can converse about it in an open, honest way, I think the better. I guess to wrap us up, if you have advice, I want to talk to the parents here who have to straddle the grandparents, who have to, navigate their own children. If you had to leave people with one kind of solid overarching piece of advice for thinking about these things we're talking about today, what would that be?
I'll jump in first. I'm sure Kelly has some things to say too, but it's broaching the topic, even if it feels scary because you haven't spoken about it in the past. So if parents didn't speak, if your parents, the parents' parents, so the grandparents didn't speak openly about money, and therefore you and your parents don't have a great financial relationship, and you're waiting for them to say something about their money, but you don't share anything about yours, you might never get there. So just tiptoeing into that conversation, just saying like, hey, we've been working with our financial planner. Here's some of the things that we're considering. And this is what I talk to my clients about, saying like, we're trying to plan for college. And we know that you have a 529 plan for the grandkids, and we just don't know what's in it, where you're putting in it, and we don't want to overfund ours. So like, could we just have a conversation about that? Maybe that's the door opener. It's still one of the most challenging conversations I see, and it's kind of a game stopper because people tend to not get anywhere with that. But I do think it's important because some grandparents will start to open up, but it's going to take some work. So if you're just open and you act that way and you're honest about things and you want to know and learn and it's coming from a good place, I think that's what you should probably start doing that.
And hopefully to bookend that, if that's just not possible, I think it's helpful to understand what you truly can control and then let go of the rest. Because I think this kind of, especially money is emotional, that can eat you up, especially if you feel like there's a dynamic where it's not fair or it's not right. And you could be correct, and that's not going to change the situation. So that can really build resentment if you're not going to let go of some things. I realize it's not with money, but like TV is a big thing for me, like screen time. When our daughter goes over to either set of our grandparents, they are like just plunking her down like cartoon, big like stuff that we don't watch. I'm like, please stop. Why are you doing this? And it's like, okay, you know what? It's an hour out of her week, that particular week when she's with them. It doesn't matter. I don't need to harass them over that, even though it's not what I would do in my own home. So I know that's not a money example, but hopefully that can, apply it to if there is a money issue. Is it going to move the needle? Is it worth like having strife in otherwise what would be a perfectly harmonious relationship? It's probably best to let it go, even if it's not financially optimal. You're not getting to the best planning you could possibly do or the best answer you could possibly do. You have your life to live in the moment also. So I think letting go of what you can is probably better for the long term.
Eric, Kaylee, this has been great. I love the insights you shared. There will be detailed show notes at thelongterminvestor.com. But for those who are watching or listening, what is the best way to find and follow along with you two?
We have a podcast, Money for Life. You can find that anywhere you get your podcasts. And we are also at beyondyourhammock.com. That is our financial planning firm's website. So you can learn more about us, what we do, who we help there.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for joining me. And everybody else, as always, thanks for listening and watching. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks for listening to the Long-Term Investor Podcast. To access free financial resources and submit questions to be answered on the show, visit thelongterminvestor.com. Peter Lazaroff is an employee of PlanCorp and BrightPlan. All opinions expressed by Peter and any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of PlanCorp or BrightPlan. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of PlanCorp and BrightPlan may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.